this morning. It was cold when I woke up. How about you guys? Did I turn on the heat yet? No, me neither. All right. Well, in order for us to begin this meeting, we need to call it to order, and someone needs to make a motion about having this meeting virtually. Mark, where are you? You there?
I can do it, but I can't. I was looking for the agenda. I can't find the language. I'm so sorry. Try to pull it up.
I got it.
All right. Hey.
So I move, you guys ready? I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this council. Meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and any rule conflicting with the governor's executive order permitting electronic meetings be suspended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by someone. I'm not Tom. Thank you, Tom. Tom, you've got a beautiful view from your office, and the light behind you completely makes your face dark. So you're wet, so you can make faces all day long if you want. Never know.
I just did.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right. So we have a motion and a second to conduct this meeting virtually. One of the things that we have to do around electronic meetings is every vote that we take needs to be a roll call vote, which I think we pretty much have been doing. So we're going to do a roll call, which will serve as our who's present and who's not. And please say you're present and whether you are a yes or a no on this motion. Abigail, would you please do that?
Yes, and I'm going to go through the entire roster.
Yes, please.
Elena Boyer.
Present and yes.
April Calvin.
Present and yes.
Ashley Oswald. Not present. Ryan Ellis.
Yes, and here, or present.
Alex Smith.
Present and yes.
Michelle Hall.
Present and yes.
Brian Hassett. Not present. Don Diener.
Yes. Present.
Norman Humber.
Present and yes.
Catherine Knowles. I thought I saw her.
You're muted, Catherine.
Present and yes.
Thank you. Sheila Decker.
Present and yes.
Mark Overlock.
Present and yes.
Mary Catherine Rand.
Present and yes.
Beth Shin.
Present and yes.
Freddie O'Connell. Don't believe he's present. Aaron Evans. Not present. Sandra Sepulveda. Not present. Will Connolly.
Hey, I'm here.
And do you agree to the virtual motion?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Paula Foster.
Present and yes.
Laura Bermudez.
Present and yes.
Vicki Batcher. Don't believe she's present. Wendell Seagroves. Jeff Gibson? I'm sorry, Jeff, if you said it, I didn't hear you. Can you say it again? For some reason, we can't hear you. I think it has to be a vocal vote for yes. So at this point, I'll just mark you as you are present. I see you here, but that you've abstained. Charlie Strobel? Not present. Tom Turner?
Present and yes.
All right. Is there anybody that I missed? For our non-voting advisors, let me do their roll call. Renee Pratt? Is somebody from MDHA, Treva Gilligan, are you on? Or
Yes,
ML
I'm
Alexander? Yes? Okay. And Hannah Davis?
present.
Great. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all very much. We are going to start our meeting as we do each month with a moment of silence for those that we have lost. I would like to read their names and we will quietly recognize our loss. First is Shirley Johnson, Jerry E. Brown, Joe Crow Fugit, Tracy Podney, Kobe Ashane. Does anyone know of anyone else who passed that we might have missed? All right. I'd like to take a moment to remember those and those that are still out living in the streets when it's starting to get cold. Please keep those in mind. All right, thank you all very much. The next thing that we need to do before moving on is to declare any conflicts of interest that we may have. I will, again, Abigail, should we go down the roll and ask that question of everyone, or how do we need to do that in this particular meeting?
I'm not sure. I don't know if Derek's on.
I don't think so. At this point, I think we will, if you have a conflict of interest.
Derek is on, but has a camera issue.
Hey, Derek, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Do we need to roll call for conflict of interest, or just let anyone speak up if they think they have one?
I don't think you have to, if you're not taking a vote or actually making a deliberative decision, you can simply ask them to speak up if they believe they have.
Okay, great. I will begin. I have my wife works for Nashville Cares, who receives emergency solutions grant funding, but no HUD funding. So that is a potential conflict.
Hi, this is April Calvin. I work for the Salvation Army. We receive CLC and ESG funds.
Tom Turner with Downtown Partnership. We have applied for and received ESG funds.
Sheila Decker. I'm a contract vendor with the Salvation Army.
Mark Orbelak, my wife Wendy works with Catholic Charities, and I believe they get funds that flow through MDHA and HUD.
Michelle Hall, Oasis Center, and we are a COC funded agency.
Mary Catherine Rand, I work for the Mary Parish Center, and we receive ESG and COC funds.
Gibson, I'm on the board at Room in the Inn. Hey, this is Will Conley. I work for Poach Center, and we receive ESG funds, and we have a contract with Metro.
Kathy Jennings with the contributor. We receive ESG funds.
Kathy, thank you for that. As a committee chair, I'm not sure that that was necessary, but I appreciate you sharing that with us. And good work on the contributor. Anybody else? I will also say that while I do not think that it is a conflict, I'm the executive director at Open Table Nashville. We do not receive any funding through the COC or NDHA. However, we are a service provider, so just for you to be aware. All right. Thank you so much. And that will take us into our next agenda item, which is an update from the Homeless Impact Division and from NDHA. So Judy and Susie, did you flip a coin to see who goes first?
I can go first, and then I pitch it to Susie.
Sounds good.
So we at the Homeless Impact Division, we have already presented, I think it was 2 months ago, to all of you that we would do board training online and create modules. So we're working on that. So watch for emails from us that all of you will get. We're doing our notes in PowerPoint format and then set up like 30-minute trainings and see, or 20 minutes, and see how many of you show up and how that works. But I wanted to make sure that all of you have actually the notes on different topics of what is the continuum of care, what is HMIS, what is coordinated entry, just things like that. So be patient with us. We have a whole lot going on, as you know, with the ESG funds and everything, but we are plugging away and this is coming. So once in a while, once we have that, a few figure out, I'm going to start sending those out on a regular basis in between. So pay attention. I think it's good review for all of us to go through that. Real quickly, the Homeless Impact Division role, we're doing planning and coordination mainly. We are the HMS lead agency. We're the coordinated entry lead agency. And we're also doing a lot of community trainings around HMAS and coordinated entry that includes care coordination meetings. Some of those will be weekly meetings with the community. We're working with several dozen community providers on creating that system, on making sure that the many meetings we have right now, even with ESG, with refugee housing, with outreach coordination, that all of that is set up, coordinated, be part of that, bringing some expertise around that. And we're doing some outreach coordination. We have, at present, I have one full-time staff member who is on 4 days a week, and then 2 on 2 days a week that they are responding to a lot of requests we get from the community about homeless encampments especially. And I just wanted to share with you how much the calls, and a lot of them are actually formulated in some type of complaint, are coming in. So in September, we responded to 43 of those requests this September compared to 23 last year. And when we look at the quarter, July through September, this quarter we had 119 calls. Last year, 67. And just to let you know what that involves, we're going out wherever that call is and they're coming in from all across Davidson County. So our outreach worker goes out to the encampments, checks what is going on, what are the issues, let the people who are there know what the nature of the request or complaint was. And then that usually involves multiple trips because not everybody's there when we show up. And then communication, we're trying to figure out if they're already connected to a service provider in the community. If not, can we connect them, or what do they need and what assistance are they willing to work with us on? So it's very involved. Our requests come in through Nashville's hub, that's the 311 setup, directly from other departments, parks, police, sometimes codes, sometimes public works, sometimes water department, and then also directly from the community who may call me. And that's kind of what we do on that. We, at this time, are really focusing on a landlord search effort that is going to be aligned with the whole emergency solution grant and what Susie's going to talk about. We had we have about 8 to 10 organizations, and we're coordinating who's doing landlord searches, who's working with which motels. Motels can be utilized if they agree to a 1-year long-term lease with people. They can be utilized for rapid rehousing. Also, we need to pay attention that if motels agree to be utilized that way, that any lease agreement is renewable after that 1 year to be counted as permanent housing. We are working and continue to work very closely with MDHA and our technical assistance provider from HUD. Heather has been, you know her, she's been on these calls. She apologizes she can't be on this morning. She had a conflict. And with that, I want to pitch it over. Well, I want to see what questions. Actually, one thing, you're going to get this in the report, but I want to report out every month about the housing placements. So far in 2020, there have been 731 individuals, and this data is pulled out of the coordinated entry database within HMAS. So 731 individuals from January through the end of September have moved into permanent housing. That constitutes 255 households. And just the last 3 months, September were 43 individuals, which was 16 households. August, 80 individuals, 28, that made up 28 households. And in July, 65 individuals that made up 27 households. You will get that data in writing as we do every month. And with that, I'm going to pitch it over to Susie, if there are no other questions.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, Judy and Paula. I'm going to just cover very quickly the NOFA, and then can we go then into ESG and the point in time count? Is that okay with you guys? Right. Okay. There are a couple of new folks on the commission, so I'll just give a little bit of an explanation. I'm Susie Tolney, the homeless coordinator at MDHA. MDHA is the public housing agency for the city, and so it operates the housing choice vouchers, or what people know as the Section 8 subsidies, as well as owns the public housing in town that is going through a dramatic transformation if you've been through East Nashville lately. But it also administers formula funds from HUD through our community development department, and those are the emergency solutions grants funds that we're making a big deal about now because there's so much of it, which is a pleasure. And the CDBG program, which is community development block grant funds, the home program, and the HOPWA program, which is housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. I am the homeless coordinator there, and I facilitate the local competition for the HUD program called Continuum of Care, and typically spending months every year bothering a lot of you all to get information together on our city efforts to address homelessness and how we're doing on system performance measures. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that process has been postponed, and we still do not know when the notice of funding availability is going to be dropping. So here it is, mid-October. We're talking about fiscal year 2020 funds. It's hard to tell when HUD is going to announce the funding process. So we are waiting, but they do say that they want very much to simplify and streamline that process to a whole lot less work than it has usually been. We are hoping that they're right. They will need congressional authorization to do that, unfortunately. And I can't tell, but it seems to be couched in some language in the stimulus bill that the House and the Senate are talking about, and who knows whether that's going to pass. Perhaps in November, and if there is information that comes from HUD that does start that clock, I'll certainly send that out to the listserv. They do want to simplify it just to have all of the projects that currently have funds to renew those projects and not have any bonus amounts or new projects sort of enter the fray. And I'll try and give you an update as soon as we have one. So no news there. In terms of the ESG or the Emergency Solutions Grants funds, we typically are used to seeing around $400,000 to $450,000 in that amount. We have $10 million more than that through the CARES Act funds in 2 various waves that came through. Lots of you all have been working very hard on that. And as Judy mentioned, the housing surge, the idea with the new funding is to try and serve 400 households out there with rapid rehousing assistance that would be up to 12 months of rent assistance and case management, and attempt to reduce the numbers in the encampments as well as in the wellness shelter at the fairgrounds. So because there's so much money, it's exciting to see a new bunch of agencies who are applying for those funds to try and get that housing surge going and get those folks housed. I think on Thursday there's going to be a meeting to talk about the fact that there's a bit more demand than there is funding, and attempt with those agencies who are applying to reduce a few of their asks to make it fit in the funding amount that's out there. I know through the first wave, those grant, what are they called, grant amendments, memoranda of understanding are being signed by our executive department. In the regular annual allocation of the $450,000, those memoranda are also being signed by both the agencies and our executive director. And then the second, or the last wave, which is the largest amount, 800 and something thousand, 8 million, sorry, not million, big difference. Those are the things that are going to be talked about on Thursday. And then there are a couple of big amounts in there that may be for over $1 million each, and those will have to go to MDHA's board for approval, which may last until November before those MOUs are totally signed. And then Jaha Martin from the VA does have a brief update on the point in time count in scheduled for late January of 2021. If you all have any questions, or Judy or Treva, and without Heather here, but you guys might have a few extra things to add in terms of the ESG activity. Be glad to answer any questions if I can.
If I can jump, this is Judy. If I can jump in, and something that Susie said, but I just want everybody to have a very clear message. The goal is to house 400 plus people within the next 12 to 18 months. I just need to also make sure that we are really working very hard and have a lot of HUD technical assistance to help us with that, to utilize the coordinated entry process. That's a requirement of ESG. So the referral process will go through coordinated entry, and that includes all the shelters and all people living outdoors. But when we look at the overall numbers, 400 people is, we don't know what the overall homelessness number in the end will look like because we don't know exactly what COVID inflow will be. At present, I keep a close eye on if we're seeing huge increases in either, especially in the shelter systems. I have the hard data to look at that, and we haven't seen huge increases there. I keep a pulse with nonprofits that do outreach on the outdoor homelessness, and we have not seen a huge increase there. The outdoor census is always based on by name lists right now, and they have been steady on that front. So any fallout from COVID, I expect actually, if there is, we don't know what it looks like and what it will look like. And we haven't seen that on the streets yet with the measures that the governments have in place at this point.
I did just want to finish up by saying the Continuum of Care General meeting that usually happens on the third Thursday of every month is canceled for tomorrow. We knew that the Planning Council would be meeting today, and a lot of what we would talk about tomorrow would be a rehash. And with no NOFA appearing on the near horizon, that will not be going on, just so you know. The Data Committee is due to meet Friday at 9, and the Performance Evaluation is scheduled to meet next Tuesday at 3. If Jaha's around, maybe she can go over the point in time count committee, subcommittee.
Do we want to do that now? I think that's later, Susie, in
Okay,
our
sure.
committee updates. So hang out for a minute, Jaha. Thanks for being here, by the way. All right, anything else from Susie or Judy around update stuff? Any questions for them? Awesome. Either we are not all awake or we're just all right on it this morning. I'm not sure which it is. So. All right. So the next thing is the Community Solutions Grant CARES Act. Is there anything further to go over with that? Or Susie, did you just do that?
I'm sorry, I was blanking. What were you talking about? ESG?
The next thing on the agenda is Emergency Solutions Grant CARES Act. Is there more for you to say about that?
No.
No.
That was in there.
Okay.
Unless Treva has anything to add from MDHA's standpoint.
All right. Nothing from Treva? All right. I want to say actually welcome to a handful of folks who have jumped on since we did our roll call, both to Vicky and Freddie. I'm not sure if there's anyone else who's jumped on since then, but glad you're here. All right. So the next thing is strategic plan. I will tell you that the executive committee is trying to make sure that we are reviewing the strategic plan and trying to keep things on track. So Judy, would you give our update on that, please?
Yes. So the executive committee, as Paula said, is working really hard on going over the process. This week, I have sent out a sheet, a template to all the committee chairs. It's a monthly reporting template. Some of you may remember we started implementing that in February, and then COVID hit and we didn't meet anymore. So we're picking that back up. The goal is to have this process that committee chairs will report the template back on what they're working on, looking at their strategic plan, and give an update on where they are. They will also, in that report, there is a section of where they're gonna request to be put on the agenda of the Homelessness Planning Council if there's something to report out that they would like to do. Then they also is the process in place for them to review where all the tasks that are assigned to their committee, what makes sense, where they are, if they need to update the timeline. So it can be funneled up through the executive committee before these meetings and then come to you. So the decisions are still with the Homelessness Planning Council. It is really helpful, and you have transferred that request to the executive committee to really do the discussion and nitty-gritty and reviewing all of the committee work. So that's happening, and we're starting that process right now. One of the things that we've also discussed, there is a committee that the Homelessness Planning Council has created, and that's the Resource Development Committee. So those are discussions going on. You also prior last year have created what is some of the template, who needs to be on a committee, what is the purpose, and you've created all of that, like the purpose for this committee. So these are discussions to assign this committee. The Resource Development Committee has quite a few tasks on the strategic plan, so looking to review that. Also with the strategic plan overall, there is just the executive committee, you assign that to them to review after a year where it is, where all the things are, what needs to be updated. And especially with the new COVID reality, there may be some reviews going on and updates, but all the final updates will come to you for a vote. So I just wanted to, I think there needs to be a standing, agenda item on the strategic plan, so all of you are involved and know what's going on. But by November, when you get the material from us, you can expect to actually get all committee reports. So while not every committee chair will report out or be on the agenda, you will see what they reported. And so you can read up on that and follow that as well on a monthly basis. And that's about it, where we are with that.
All right, any questions for Judy around strategic planning? All right. Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to move on to committee reports. And we'll start with Jaha and the point in time count subcommittee. Jaha, thanks for being with us this morning. Give us an update on where we're at.
Good morning. So as Susie talked about, we are gearing up for our 2021 point in time sheltered and unsheltered count. And as she talked about, we really don't have any guidance at this point from HUD as to what they anticipate the unsheltered count looking like. But we as a committee are anticipating, of course, a modified count and what that may look like. And so we have been exploring those options, as well as, of course, looking at how to modify the survey so that it is not as extensive and can reduce the time that people are out and having to interface with others. We don't know exactly what that will look like until HUD gives us their vision, which we anticipate within the next week or so. And we are also considering what CDC precautions will need to be taken care of and considered for the night of the count and prior to, and just how to structure the entire PIT this year. And there will also, Rachel is working on modifications to the sheltered count so that hopefully it's less laborious for those who are doing that. And so we plan to work and review some of the information that she has. We are looking at the January 21st as the date for the 2021 count. And then of course we have backup dates. Just because if 2021 comes in as 2020, we may have a blizzard on that day, who knows? So are there any questions for me? If not, thank you.
You know, you didn't have to say the B word because it's probably going to come in just like that. And who knows? All right. Any questions for Jaha around point in time? For those of you who are new to the Planning Council, do you know what the point in time count is? Do you have any questions around that? All right. Oh, all right then. Good to go. Next is Kathy Jennings is here with us today to talk to us about our shelter committee and kind of what winter planning looks like around those kinds of things. So take it away, Kathy.
Great. Thanks everybody for being here and for all the hard work that you do. So the shelter committee has been meeting quite often to try to determine our extreme weather plan. And for those of you who don't know what that is triggered when the weather forecast is supposed to be 28 degrees or below. So that's when the extreme weather shelter plan goes into effect. There's a website and there's phone numbers for people to call, and we're putting together the final plans because some of this starts taking effect November 1st. So I'm just going to go through the providers and let you know what's going on with each provider. This is going to look quite different than it did last year due to COVID. So Room in the Inn, they are down to 17 congregations confirmed, and their number is growing. They will probably be at 75 to 100 capacity, which is about half of what they were last year. To maximize their space, and because there are other shelters available for women, they will only be taking men this year. And there will be no late night drop-offs as there have been in years past. They are working towards an answer on how to access the Room in the Inn. And what she told me is, and I just got an email from her this morning, that as they work through this right now, they are going to work with those who are currently engaged in their daily services. And as capacity increases, they will work to include others. So we are going to give outreach workers their phone number, and they can call and they'll help triage people that they come in contact with. So that's what's going on with Room in the Inn right now. The Nashville Rescue Mission will operate pretty much as it has been. Single men, single women, women with children. December through March, they also take people with pets. So they'll accommodate people with pets. Their capacity due to social distancing measures taken will be about half. So 300 men, 150 women. During let me see something here. During winter, they do lift the bar somewhat for non-violent offenses. So people who have been barred from the mission, they will make it easier access to get in. But the violent behavior can't be tolerated. So then our overflow shelter, and I think you all have had a presentation on the Fairgrounds OEM Metro Overflow Shelter. That will then open up at 7 p.m. at night. So that's open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And when the mission is full and when outreach workers come, they can go to the fairgrounds directly, and they will have space for people there. The fairgrounds is also open to sex offenders and any other people that might have difficulty, people who have been barred from the mission. Launch pad services, youth 18 to 24. Due to COVID funding, they do have rooms available, and they coordinate with Oasis Center, and they have an Oasis Center hotline. So the number there is 615-327-4455. Now, we identified a gap in all of these services, and that is families with children. Since the fairgrounds does take sex offenders, they cannot accommodate children at the fairgrounds. So if we have men with children or families with children, we didn't have a clear process on where they were to go. We've been working really closely with the Salvation Army, though, to come up with a plan for that, and I feel really confident that we're very close. Does anyone have any questions about this extreme weather plan so far?
Kathy, I'll start with one. The overflow shelter, are they going to be taking men and women, and what about people with pets?
Yes, they are. They're taking people with pets, right, Judith? I have down here they are.
Yes. And if you, so yes.
Okay, yeah.
And that's at the 28 degrees overflow. The only, we never could accommodate really families with minor children because of that. We don't screen for sex offenders.
So to be clear, yeah, right now we're only talking about the extreme weather overflow emergency plans. And in the fairgrounds, we'll have some stipulations. There will be parking at the fairgrounds, so people will be able to drive to the fairgrounds. They will need to get there, and we'll make all of this clear. They will need to get their belongings out of the car when they go into the fairgrounds, because once in the fairgrounds, there won't be multiple trips back and forth out to the cars, just for safety reasons for the guests inside.
Okay, so at the fairgrounds, are there going to be men and women at the fairgrounds, or are the women going to be sheltered somewhere else?
There'll be men and women at the fairgrounds, because it will just be the emergency shelter from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
But couples would have to be separated, is that correct? Couples without children?
No, they will be together. It's like every year, and it's the same plan that I presented to you guys. I think we did it in August. It's all still in place, and we actually have a Metro run through for final logistics about exactly which door to enter and all of that on this week. So all that information and signage will be made clear as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at putting signage up so people know which door to go to at Metro. And again, I do want to stress this. This is an overflow shelter. If everyone just goes to Metro, it will max out. Okay, so outreach workers, organizations, please direct people to the missions. If your people are working with Room in the Inn, please call there. But then this is the overflow shelter for extreme weather.
Okay.
So, up on the count, folks who are out of doors, close to a third of them were part of groupings. couples, adult child and parent, groupings that would not ordinarily be accommodated in either a women's shelter or a men's shelter. Are we thinking about trying to keep the family groupings together?
Yes. Now, if they're all adults, they'll be able to stay together at the fairgrounds. If there are minor children involved, that's where we're working with the Salvation Army. And April, if you want to jump in, please feel free to jump in about that. They are working to accommodate, to make the process easier. So they'll be the point of contact to triage families with minor children, whether it's just women and minor children, men with minor children, or whole families.
Hi, everyone. So I was out on vacation last week and I just heard about this a little bit, that that was a request for us. So definitely for us, it would be either triaged into our shelter if there's an opening or into a hotel. We have some state funding that can do small amounts of hotels. Mainly, our main goal for the state funding was rapid rehousing dollars. So even if we need to triage them into a rapid rehousing situation, we hear that there's only typically, right, no more than 10 during the whole cold weather shelter season. So we definitely think that that's something that's within our wheelhouse.
Thank you, April.
Well,
we have spoken with the mission and with Room in the Inn to see, how often we have the families with the minor children that the mission can't accommodate, because the mission can accommodate women with children, but the families with younger children. And, they typically will present themselves 4 to 6 p.m. It's nothing that they come super late. And so far in the past, it has really not been more than the 10 a year.
So let me just say real quickly, and I want to get to other people's questions, a couple things. While I'm glad we rely on what data and information that we have from previous years, I will put out there that we have no idea what this year is going to look like, because while there may be a supposed moratorium on evictions, we all know that that's not necessarily happening the way it was intended or thought about. So we don't know what to expect in terms of increases in homelessness, particularly around families with children. So I think we need to be aware and somewhat prepared to have an influx of folks in that demographic. And so preparing and trying to figure out what we can offer is something I think that's going to be incredibly important. I have two other things. One is, do we know anything from the city regarding ongoing funding to operate the overflow shelter at the fairgrounds after December, when I understand some of the funding from the CARES Act may be running out?
I mean, I can answer that question that I don't think anybody in the entire United States has any answers about funding after December for anything. But if someone from the city wants to jump in on plans, I mean, I feel confident that the leaders in our city, and I mean, that they're not going to just kick everyone out of the fairgrounds come December 31st. But I can't speak for the city. But if there's anyone out there that has more comments on that, please feel free.
This is Judy, and there are, well, on all of these fronts, the conversations are going on first of all, yes, we're looking at what the data was in the past, but we are all discussing of, okay, what happens and continuing the planning more intensely, I think, once the cold weather hits, to just evaluate where things are, because we cannot predict what it looks like. On the funding front, with the cold weather, those are conversations and questions that we have as well, and we are actually looking into it right now as well. And that's part of that meeting that we are having also this week. We just have no answer from our end at MSS yet.
And I do want to assure everyone that we're having lots, I mean, this is not something that we're meeting once a month about and hoping that this all comes together. We're having lots of meetings on the sides and lots of phone conversations. They've been good phone conversations. I personally have spoken with OEM, I've spoken with Metro, with Salvation Army, because I don't think the process needs to unfold. So it's easy for everybody, right? But I don't feel there'll be mothers and fathers with children on the streets in Nashville. I think that we've got things coming together. We just need to figure out exactly the steps. And we're so close. I just don't want to give anybody any, I don't want to tell everyone, call the Salvation Army no matter what, until we actually have that plan in place.
Hey, Kathy, that makes sense. And again, I know the answers to some of these questions. I just want to make sure that we're discussing them.
Yeah, thank you.
With everyone.
Thank you, Michelle.
And I know there is no answer to the funding question at this particular point in time, but it's still something that we all need to have in our minds at the forefront at this point. One more thing.
Hey, Paula, excuse me.
Hold on. Whoa, Alex, hold on. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to toss it to Michelle and then to Alex. The other thing that I wanted someone to touch on quickly, Kathy and Judy, is transportation to the shelters when necessary, and how's that going to work this year?
I am so glad you said that. Okay, so Metro, the bus, MTA, or WeGo, whatever it's called now, they do provide bus passes, okay, that trigger when temperatures get 32 degrees. And that is something outreach workers really need to look at doing. There are not going to be additional bus passes, but there are also annual bus passes that they issue through, I mean, you have to enter people in HMIS to get them. And I think there's another 450 of those. So altogether, there are 850 bus passes available for people. But outreach workers need to access those bus passes. Judy, did you have something to add about it?
How do they do that?
I'm going to let Judith.
Yeah, so the 350 WeGo bus pass is called weather cards. That's also been going on for years. They're distributed from we get these bus passes from WeGo, and then we distribute them to outreach workers. We're really going through outreach workers, not other shelters. And the reason is because the goal is to identify people that are in outlying areas and not that close to the downtown core, so they have a way to come in. And they can use those, as Kathy said, at 32 degrees. They can use it to go to wherever they need to go indoors. So the goal and the way these are distributed is we want outreach workers to have leeway to identify some of the most vulnerable people. And what also happens, we have a lot of outreach workers and a lot of organizations that want these. So in the end, an organization may get 25, and an outreach worker themselves get 2 or 3. So on overall, we have quite a few of these, but when you look at the individual outreach worker, they never have enough. So we're trying to, and WeGo is really good to stay in touch with me. And we used to have 250, they upped it to 350 a few years ago. So the annual bus pass program, that is a special program we have in place for people who experience chronic homelessness or are at risk of chronic homelessness. That means they have a disabling condition, have already been on the streets or in shelters for at least 5 months. So that housing navigators need to agree to work with people towards housing. And a person who applies for wants this bus pass, they need to work actively with the housing navigator towards housing. And there are some conditions around that people need to be entered in HMAS for these bus passes. They are good every day. It's an annual bus pass where they can drive the bus to appointments and whenever they need it. Also, once they get into housing, for example, somebody receives the bus pass today and in 3 months is in housing, they will not lose their bus pass for that year, but it's not renewable after that year. So and right now, only about 50 of those are out there. We have up to 500. Yeah. Right now, this is very urgent. Also combined with, when you think about the emergency solution grant, the rapid rehousing opportunities where people have to be in HMS, in coordinated entry, this lines up really nicely with that whole process as we're trying to house people. So that's kind of the other opportunity that we really want to push because it's very helpful to people. But it really depends also on service providers distributing these and then working with people towards housing.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Chandra, would you see on the attendee list, Erin Evans is on the attendee list, and she needs to be a panelist. If you can try to figure that out, that'd be great. All right, Michelle, and then Alex, and then I think Dawn and someone else had a hand up.
I had a hand up.
Okay. Elena. Okay, so Michelle, then Alex, then Dawn, then Elena.
Kathy, I just want to clarify about Oasis Center being a hotline to get young people into Launchpad. I think we need to talk to Launchpad about that. I know that was the plan a couple years ago. I wasn't aware that we were doing the reservations this year. So just before we put that forward as the official plan, I just want to touch base with them to clarify.
Okay. That's good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alex.
Here's my problem, and this has been my problem for years, even when I was out on the street. Who decide on the 28 degrees is when we should shelter the homelessness? Can somebody give me that answer? Because to me, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, Alex.
Because I've been on the streets when it's colder than that and there was no shelter. I've been on the streets when it was 28 degrees and a shelter. I have an issue when it comes to having a particular number because a lot of the people don't know unless they talk to other people. They don't know when the shelter buses are coming or go find their cold weather passes or anything. But 28 degrees to me is asinine. I can understand if you want to say, hey, if it hits 34 degrees, let's do it. I'm cool with 34. But 28, it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. So you mean to tell me it could be 40 degrees at 7 o'clock, but then it can drop all the way down to 20 degrees by midnight, and then there's nothing that anybody could do.
Okay, so Alex, let me just say first of all, I appreciate your input, and you're absolutely right. There are some arbitrary kinds of things that we make decisions around, but unfortunately, we have to figure out how to make those decisions and when to make those decisions. And so we've been doing overflow shelters for what, 5-6 years, something to that effect. And this has been an ongoing discussion about when the overflow shelters are activated and when they're not. So what I want you to remember is the 28-degree mark is when Metro opens an overflow shelter. It doesn't mean that that there are shelters available at other times, but this is when Metro opens the overflow shelter. And it is not a perfect system. It's not a perfect formula. We had to come up with a plan to have that triggers that particular thing that happens. And after back and forth multiple times in the last few years, this is where we're at today. Doesn't mean that we're going to stay at that place forever, but today this is how that decision is made. And it is also made based on forecast, not actual temperature at 7 o'clock. So if the forecast is that the temperature is going to drop below 28 degrees or below, the shelter's open. Even if that means that actually the temperature only got down to 29, we still opened because the forecast was that it was going to be 28 or below. So it will be open in that regard. So again, not a perfect system, but it is what we have to work with at the moment. But I really want to say thank you for that input and that perspective. It's why we wanted you on this planning council, because hearing from you and those of you who've been out there means a lot to us. And I want you to know that I appreciate that input. So, Kathy, do you have anything else to add to that?
I do have something else to add to that. So it's really interesting, Alex, because this year has been an unusual year in that we have had the fairgrounds operating also all year. So it's kind of, to put it in y'all's minds, we have the fairgrounds open, and right now entrance is through the Mission, right? But then people get referred to the fairgrounds. And there's COVID testing involved in that. When we trigger the emergency, and that's the day before, Judith looks at the forecast, and if it's supposed to drop 28 degrees. So you essentially have 48 hours to start planning for that. Hopefully outreach workers are starting to plan now for that and getting people used to what this is. But then suddenly that people can go to the fairgrounds at 7 p.m., right? And couples can stay together, and there's no longer the COVID testing requirement for that. So that's the big difference there. If you all can, conceptualize that. But, Alex, I do agree with the bus passes. Those are things that need to be planned on now. And so if there's one thing I can encourage outreach workers and coordinators to do is that don't wait until it gets 28 degrees. Okay, start talking with people now about what their plans are for winter. We do have a ton of rapid rehousing dollars about to hit, but what we can be doing now is engaging these people, getting them in HMIS, starting to order birth certificates. So when these dollars hit, we can move them into rapid rehousing. And we've got landlord meetings, and I know personally we've had some success with getting landlords and people on board. So while we haven't had housing in the past, there's when landlords know that there's going to be a guaranteed rent payment there, they're much happier to jump on board here and do rapid rehousing. So if I can encourage people to do anything, it's to not think about what are we going to do in an emergency, but let's plan ahead.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Dawn and then Elena.
So I have one quick question to make sure that I understood something, Kathy, that you just said. Did you say no COVID testing for family shelter or just no COVID testing for the overflow shelter?
This is if there's an emergency. Okay, if there's emergencies, then people go to the Mission. If it's 7 p.m. at night and it's going to be 28 degrees, you go to the Mission. If the Mission is at capacity, then you go to the overflow shelter. And
okay, there's no COVID testing for that.
No, there wouldn't be COVID testing for that. Correct, Judith? I don't misquote.
Yes. Here's Dawn. Here's how when it's the 28 degrees shelter, it's about getting people inside. There will be temperatures taken, symptoms taken, kind of the monitoring, but we cannot require people. We cannot, they can't show up with a current test results. But we also are looking at if somebody then decides from that they're in the overflow shelter and they decide, look, I want to stay in the shelter, there's going to be a process in place to explain to them what that process is, how to get the test, how they can go over to the PUI side, the kind of the isolation side until the test results come in, how they can then access the shelters on the well side. So there is an access process that they can stay longer, if they choose to do so. So that's kind of the setup that we are looking at.
Okay. I guess that was sort of the other thing that as I've been listening to this conversation, I feel a little bit like we're hoping all of this works without talking about COVID. Because, I know just less than 2 weeks ago, the Women's Mission was on lockdown because of the COVID outbreak there. And, I understand we're still operating the COVID shelter at the fairgrounds. And when I read the story about the Women's Mission and what was happening there, the media report was again people taken from that facility, put on a bus, shipped over to the fairgrounds, had to go through testing there. It sounds to me like, and I apologize, I wasn't at the last monthly meeting, but it sounds to me like we're still kind of operating the COVID fairground shelter under those restrictions that have always existed. I guess I kind of wanted to know, we've had a little bit of talk around money for hotels. There was conversation around whether or not CARES Act dollars could be used to place more people who are COVID positive in hotel rooms so that they're not having to endure that illness at the fairgrounds. So just kind of wanted to inquire if there's, I'm sure there has been discussion around the impact that COVID is going to have on this, but how do you contact trace? Is there contact tracing if, somebody who shows up at a cold weather shelter then eventually turns out to have COVID? How does that work?
So thank you for bringing that up, because that is actually something we have looked at. The Women's Mission was closed. So again, we have issues both in extreme weather and not extreme weather, what to do if a woman shows up at the mission and they've been quarantined, the mission's been quarantined. So OEM says that if a woman shows up at the mission, and we'll make sure we get this word out, a single woman shows up at the mission and the mission is closed and cannot take her at any time, that she can be transported to the fairgrounds and they will put her in their unit, what they call persons under investigation, who are receiving the COVID testing to determine whether they're clean, whether they're healthy or whether they're sick. If a woman with a child shows up at that mission, that was a vulnerability that we identified then, or a family, but if the mission is closed and that shows up, so that is what we're working also with the Salvation Army on, having a chain of command and a process for that. Where do they refer that person from there? And you are right, Dawn, there have been dollars through the CARES Fund that have filtered down. There are time limits on when those dollars can be spent. So we may all feel secure that we can do this through the end of December, but then what happens in January and February? How do we, when you apply for reimbursements, there's all sorts of things attached. So we have rapid rehousing dollars coming due. So as April talked about, we may be able to take those families and immediately put them in a rapid rehousing program and house them that way. So there have been a lot of conversations. You guys probably don't want me to take up your time detailing all this.
Also, I think we're combining a lot of conversations. There is COVID conversation, there's cold weather conversation, there's normal shelter conversation, and then there's also rapid rehousing conversation. We can't make all of them fit into one conversation. It probably will be better just for everyone's brain, right? To like separate them out. We're only talking about cold weather instead of throwing all of these others on top, because they all come with a different set of guidelines, a different set of funding sources, a different set of rules that we have to play by in order to get the reimbursement. So I think we're having a long conversation that we've turned all 5 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those into one conversation instead of it being separate. And really they need to be separate so that everyone is aware of what's going on in a situation like this: COVID, emergency shelter, cold weather, and or rapid rehousing.
Right. April, hold on, Kathy. April, thank you for that. And you're right. However, we all know that these separate conversations are now all merging into one, because you can have all the separate conversations you want, but when it comes to cold weather and overflow, we have to figure out what we're doing. So this is what we're doing. But thank you for that. I want to get to Elena, and then if anyone else has burning questions, I mean, we could sit here all day long and rehash the committee's work and everything that we're doing, and we want to make sure that you understand where we're at and where we're coming from. However, I will be perfectly blunt and say none of the options are optimal. But this is what we have to work with, and we're doing the best we can. The shelter committee has been very thoughtful around it, and I appreciate the work that they're doing. And it's not a perfect system, and we're going to continue to try to work to make it better. And that's why these conversations are important. So thank you all for your input. So Elena, if you would have a comment.
Yeah. So I think I'll turn back to kind of the cold weather conversation. I'm curious, and I brought this up, I think, last year, and there were some efforts towards this, but in our current climate and with us utilizing the fairgrounds, what supportive services are we doing for a lot of the trauma? I applaud and I'm so grateful for the low barrier access to the fairgrounds, but also being mindful that if we do have a new wave, we're having people who might be experiencing homelessness for the first time. If we have sex offenders in the same place, which again, congratulate, love the low barrier, what supportive services are there for those triggers and the trauma, or even just dealing with some of the outcomes of dealing with cold weather and extremities and frostbite? Just wondering what kind of partnerships are being in place, and not only at the emergency shelter, maybe the other shelters that are open too for cold weather, but if somebody can just talk to that and make sure there are these wraparound services in place and not necessarily a referral that you have to call somebody in. Wondering if anybody can talk to that a little bit.
So the extreme weather shelters are from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I don't know that OEM is bringing in extra people to do any kind of wraparound services for those. I don't know that the fairgrounds will have any extra people as far as supportive services for that. I know if the youth go to Launchpad, they're probably immediately going into rapid rehousing. I know if families are referred to the Salvation Army, they're going to immediately be going into rapid rehousing and wraparound services. I'm including wraparound services with that. As far as the mission, I don't know that they're changing their protocol at all, but I will tell you when I talked to Carrie, because they are doing the COVID testing and they're speaking to all their participants on a weekly basis, that every single person, she said, was now receiving case management in the mission. So they are doing case management.
So I guess I'm thinking different than case management. Is there any? Oh, I'm sorry, Judith. Go ahead.
So the overflow shelter is staffed by case managers of Metro Social Services and has always been. And basically, what I have observed myself, what they do is people want to come in, and a lot of times they just want to have their bed, they want to feel safe and all of that. But there are case managers there that engage people if they choose to do so. There is usually a hot meal served during a certain time to engage people and just see where they are. We have been working in the past, and we will, and also at the fairgrounds shelter right now in the COVID shelter, there's a lot of case management. Everybody's case managed there towards housing. And there are partnerships with other organizations to come in for healthcare, mental health care. So, and also in the past, just going back to the overflow shelter, we had reached out to mental health co-op and, you know, just bringing them in to see what are the opportunities to engage people. But I also have to be clear, it is first and foremost, it is getting people in out of the cold. So these opportunities are there, but what we also observed, even when we tried to do, you know, getting people into coordinated entry and assessments and starting the housing process, people are really, after a certain time in the evening, they just want to go sleep and rest. So that's another factor in that. So there's some engagement, but not like you would at a regular shelter that is an ongoing shelter. I just need to be, that's the way, you know, how it's set up.
Thank you, and that's helpful. I guess, you know, again, I think this is a difference in terminology. When I'm hearing case manager, I'm hearing housing case manager, so I'm assuming they're healthcare case managers as well. And yes, people want to get in and out of the cold. I think we're in a different climate and environment now. And what if coming into that environment is a trigger or catalyst for mental health behavior or some kind of decline that we're already seeing when it's not even an emergency situation? So it's just something I think to consider. I don't know if there's necessarily an answer that you guys have right now, but maybe there's needs to be partnerships for additional healthcare, behavioral health management. Just a thought.
Right. Thank you, Elena. Let's see. Is there any other pressing questions around shelter committee? Shelter committee is they're doing a great job considering all these things. Thank you so much for all your input. They will take these things and continue to work and consider all the questions and feedback that you've given them today. Is there anything else before we move on?
Yes, this is Alex.
Go ahead.
I want to applaud the shelter committee. I really do. Because I love the fact there's way more options now than there have ever been. And that truly makes me happy. No matter how I feel about the degree and all that, that doesn't matter. What does matter is what the city has came through and with this committee, with the shelter committee, has done, has made it me feel more comfortable to tell other people that I know that's still out on the streets, like, hey, they're really trying their hardest. They're really trying to help you. You need to be at certain spots to get where you need to go so you can be somewhere warm. I absolutely love that. It's more public and more vocal than it was, say, 7 years ago. Like a lot more people have stepped up to the plate and helped out. So for me, I really want to say thank you to that committee.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. Appreciate that. All right then.
And this is Judy. Just
Okay,
to
Judy.
one point for all of you, this committee used to be called the Extreme Weather Committee. There's a reason why it moved to Shelter Committee, to the point where Alex just made. This is a year-round issue. This is not a 28-degree issue. This is immediate access to shelter, and this committee really stepped up to looking at that, continuously looking at that. Where are the gaps? What do we need to do? Homelessness is not okay at any degrees. So I just wanted to bring that out and applaud all of you for going that direction.
Thank you, Judy. All right. Kathy, again, appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time and your efforts around this. And Alex, I think you're right. We still have a long way to go, but we're going to continue to work hard on it. And this committee is doing a great job bringing the attention to the issue that we need to continue to work on. All right, Hannah Davis is here with us. She is our liaison to the mayor's office. Hannah, do you have anything to share with us from a mayor's update perspective?
Hi, everybody. I've been coordinating with Judy on the updates that you'll hear today about the encampments. That's something that we hear a lot about at the mayor's office, both frustration and just general concern from neighbors about the condition of the encampments. And Judy does a great job of staying on top of those and coordinating with the appropriate departments, whether it's health or others, on how to keep those encampments at least as safe and clean as we can for those that are living there until we can receive the rapid rehousing dollars. So that is, I would say, a hard message for a lot of neighbors, and you know, I'm sure you all have had conversations with neighbors, and sometimes it is, you know, I don't want to look at that. And that is a harder concern to address because it's more about perhaps personal entitlement. But there are concerns that we receive that are really about the health of the residents living at the encampments. And so I'm also heartened by the comments we receive from neighbors who are saying, how can I help? What is the city doing? And so, you know, I'm aware that they have heard for, you know, in oftentimes many years, you know, we're working on it, but it's encouraging to be able to say, you know, there actually is a significant influx of money coming from HUD, and we really do have a chance to make a dent in this issue and really be able to find safer housing for our neighbors. And so many thanks to, I know some of you on the call, and then Judy and Heather Dilshaw, our HUD liaison, to be able to try to get those dollars out the door as quickly as possible, especially in anticipation of the colder months coming, which we know will likely bring an increase of COVID cases that would put our neighbors at increased risk. To the point of the evictions, in trying to keep our homelessness numbers from increasing, there is a pot of funds at United Way, which I know there are some providers on this call who are coordinated and dispersing those funds. I've been very impressed with that group. They're working really hard to make sure that we can get anyone who's currently housed but facing housing instability, get their bills up to date, and then potentially even paid, you know, through November and December, knowing that it's unlikely that their financial situation would change enough to be able to, you know, provide them housing stability through the end of the year. So, and United Way has also coordinated with the courts to try to catch anyone who may not have been aware of that pot of funds and that resource, and also may not be aware of the CDC moratorium paperwork that they need to fill out, and so would still end up at eviction court for non-payment. And So we're trying to make sure that those folks will be diverted to the CARES Act pot of funds rather than going through the eviction process. So I'm grateful for United Way and being proactive in that way, and then coordinating with the courts. And the CDC eviction moratorium is pretty broad, and because it's really focused on the health side and trying to keep people housed. So it's not only for those who necessarily experienced a direct loss of income from COVID, but it's really focused on keeping people housed. Unfortunately, you have to fill out the declaration, which not everyone knows about, and then you have to, it only applies to the end of the year. So again, to the conversation of what funding will be available, what protections will be in place come January 1st, 2021, that's still an unknown. But we are working really hard. By we, really the credit goes to the Financial Assistance Network and the United Way that's getting those funds out the door. Again, it goes for rent, mortgage, and utilities. And they are really focused on getting people caught up and maybe even making prepayments, which is unusual. But we, don't want to be in a position where we get someone caught up. But the reality is they're not going to have, income by November 1st. And so then we would invest in getting them caught up, and then they'd still be in a position where they'd be facing an eviction potentially. So that is the update on this side of housing instability and trying to prevent additional numbers in our unhoused community. That's all from me. Of course, if anyone has any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you, Hannah. Does anyone have any questions for Hannah, Mayor's office? All right.
Hey, this is Catherine, and I'm just curious, do we know what's the dollar amount remaining in that funding through United Way?
Yes, the latest update I had, they do a great job reporting that out. I believe my numbers are current as of 9/28, so this would be a couple of weeks behind, but of the 10 million that came from Metro, CARES also, United Way also received some funding from the state that they dispersed to the nonprofit partners. 7-ish million, a little bit more, had already been sent out to the partners. I did not have the numbers on how much the partners had dispersed already, but I know that there was a recent check-in to see where the partners are and whether they need basically to, re-up on their funds. If anyone on the call has that information, I was not on the Financial Assistance Network call last week, but there's a request. Originally, the CARES Act Oversight Committee had said that the funds all had to be spent by November 15th. And I think that was to provide a little bit of cushion so that because Metro has to report the funds all being spent by the middle to end of December. And United Way has gone back and asked for an extension to December 15th. And so I know that there's been a high volume of requests, but I don't know from that $7.5-ish million how much the partners have already pushed out the door. But I can get that number and report back.
Thank you, Hannah. Any other questions for Hannah? All right. Vicki Batcher, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm kind of wondering where the funds, if they have additional funds, and I may be speaking out of turn, but where are we in the building more affordable housing? I know that we're looking at private landlords and this kind of thing, but where are we as far as building more affordable housing?
A good question. Thank you, Vicki.
Yes. So for Metro's side of constructing more affordable housing, the primary source for that is the Barnes Fund. The RFP that we had open for new construction and preserving existing units has been put on hold because of the referendum. So obviously if the referendum were to go to the vote and pass, that would in all likelihood be the end of the Barnes Fund, just because of the way that it restricts future income or future property tax increases. So, you know, we would really be down to bare bones services. We wouldn't really be able to do any of those things that are what I would consider crucial for making Nashville a place that's more accessible and equitable. So we have, instead of, you know, having everyone fill out their applications and going through sort of the disappointing process of finding out the funds are not available, we just extended the deadline to January 15th and gave our nonprofit developers some more time. And by then we'll have the information that we can. Obviously, our great hope is that we're able to move forward with that round and continue funding the construction of new affordable units. And then we're also working, MDHA is, of course, not only doing the redevelopment of their units and adding units, but they are distributing the ESG home and CDBG funds, which do a portion of the construction of new affordable in town. And then the majority of the funding for new construction comes from the state with THDA. And they received some CARES Act funding that they have not put out yet. I think they're looking to sort of see how the municipalities use theirs and where they can come in and do some funding for activities that are not currently being supported. But we are advocating for additional tax credits next year, which is one of our big funding mechanisms for affordable housing, so that we can increase our units, because while a lot of municipalities are seeing sort of the real estate market soften or slow down, Nashville is continuing to increase as we've become sort of a destination city for people leaving larger cities. So I don't anticipate our rents coming down very much. So we'll have to continue our push for the creation of new affordable units. But unfortunately, I had an additional policy proposal that was going to work to create new units. That's also on hold because of the referendum.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. And thank you for the question, Vicki. Are there any other questions for Hannah at the moment? All right. Moving on to other business, I have one item that I need to bring up, is that our next Planning Council meeting is scheduled to be on Veterans Day. I believe that's right. So city offices will be closed, which means we will not have IT support to this meeting on that day, even if we were all available, which means we need to move it to the third Wednesday of the month. So please mark your calendars, and we will make that change happen for all of you who can be available. That'd be great. All right. Mark, you had a question. Do you want to ask it here or save it for later?
Yes, this is just a question. Just hearing all the great work all the staff are doing in the construction of the facility. I'm just a little curious as to whether the Homelessness Planning Council ought to consider coming up with a position statement on the tax referendum, just to help the average voter understand that there are some additional consequences that flow from it passing, and suddenly we lose significant amounts of money.
I personally think that's a great idea, and would be appropriate for us to do based on what we know the impact of the referendum passing would be on the ability for us to address the issue of homelessness in our city, and would, in my personal opinion, lead to a dramatic increase in homelessness in so many different ways. So does anyone have a issue with us putting together a statement on? Clearly, I think if we can prepare a statement about the impact of this referendum on the city and what we do specifically, we would not release that until we know whether or not the referendum is going to actually be a referendum. But I think we can go ahead and start crafting that. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a great idea. And if the contributor can help, I think that would be awesome to get that word out.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And I don't think this requires a vote. This is just something that we can work on. We will bring it to the planning council next month, I think, and present it to you for approval to release. Does that sound okay? All right, Judy, you and I can figure out a way to put that together. Maybe the executive committee can work on that. I think it's probably the right place for it. Will, did you have a question?
Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm willing to help out with that if that helps. And also just wanted to say that we're already feeling the effects of a potential referendum. Metro Social Services gave us notice that our store contract that we've had for many years is slated to be terminated just because there's a potential for this referendum being on the ballot. So we don't really need to wait for the impact. It's already kind of there, and I can help speak to that, and maybe Centerstone can too, as well as they got the same kind of notice as we did.
I'm sure Oasis can too.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes, we will reach out for your input, Will, Michelle. Yeah. Okay. Any other other business that we need to discuss today?
Freddie has his hand up. I wasn't sure if he had more.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know if we were using the hand today, but this is something I just don't know enough about. Flu season is also starting, and I don't know if in the past we have done any cold weather community response plan to make vaccines available. I don't know if there is, this is just me not knowing enough about provider strategies in this space, or, if Metro Health kind of aligns with the work of HID or anything else to make sure vaccines are available. But if there are, and I don't know if this is something we could potentially use CARES Act money on to make zero cost vaccines available to people experiencing homelessness, et cetera, as a preventive measure. But I'd just be interested to have anybody who has knowledge about flu vaccine distribution into vulnerable communities speak to that at this point.
So this
Well,
is Judy.
Go ahead, Judy.
In the past, we have worked, and we actually started conversations with the health department. So in the past, we also remember when we had the hepatitis A outbreak that was really an issue. So last year, and I think even the prior year, we had health department come up to some of the overflow shelters for offering vaccines, and also for a separate one for the flu season, and those were requests. So I actually have a meeting where with MSS and the health department also this week, where I can bring this up as well, if we particularly can plan around the overflow shelter, if that's appropriate. On that note, there are already early conversations going on for vaccination of people experiencing homelessness once a COVID vaccination would be come available. Those conversations are starting as well.
This is Susie. I just wanted to mention that the that neighborhood health they're the local health care for the homeless council recipient. They have been, MDHA was granted $50,000 through THGA's supplemental funding to COCs across the state. And they have had a doc and maybe one nurse or two going to the encampments doing CV testing, and also giving folks flu shots. That will continue through the end of October when the funding ends. But that's been an exciting development, and we might be able to give a short report on that in November.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. Thank you, Susie.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be great.
Hey, Susie, this is Tom Turner. Do you know if, we have everybody throughout all the age groups, there's a pneumonia vaccine that's for people who are high risk. I think a lot of our homeless in Nashville might be high risk. And for any of us who might be, over the age of 50 or so, I think shingles is very real. And I don't think we should ignore any of these vaccines just because somebody doesn't have access to them. So if we could look at really whatever vaccines might be available for at-risk populations, I think it'd be a huge community service. Thanks to Freddie for bringing it up.
Thank you, Tom. That is absolutely right on point. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, other thoughts, other business? All right. Well, I think you guys have done a great job, and look at that. It's only 2 minutes after 10. We did a fabulous job today. Doesn't happen often. We usually go over by quite a bit. So thank you all very much for your input. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you do and for volunteering to be part of this body. Your input, your suggestions, your thoughts help guide what happens in the city, and it is incredibly important. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Susie, and your teams for all that you guys are doing to meet the need as we go into this season where we know the need is going to be greater. So thank you. I'll give one more round of anything else anyone needs to say before we adjourn. All right. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
So moved by Tom, second by Freddie.
Okay.
Do we have to do a roll call vote to adjourn, or do we just need to all log off? Derek?
I'm not sure. Motion as the chair, you can adjourn the meeting. So.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, Paul.
everybody. Thanks, Derek.